Once again, good evening, everyone. I'm Greg Youtz, professor of music at Pacific Lutheran University and a frequent pre-concert conversationalist for Symphony Tacoma. Welcome back to the fifth and final of our 75th anniversary history videocast series. Just let me remind you of where we've been in this series, which began in September. The first one was entitled A Symphony Orchestra for the City of Destiny, 75 plus years of aspiration. And that was brought to us by my friend and colleague, Kim Davenport, a pianist and professor of music here in Tacoma, who put together a wonderful slideshow for us, showing us how classical music has been performed in Tacoma since about 1895, and an on-again, off-again attempt to create a permanent professional symphony orchestra for our city. The second video, the second episode of our videocast was called The Edward Safarian Years, a college community orchestra for Tacoma, and featured Maestro Ed Safarian's wife, Jan Safarian, as well as early and longtime members of the orchestra, Carla Epperson and Kathy Johnson. And we looked back at those years when Edward Safarian, professor of music, violinist, and composer at the University of Puget Sound, transformed what was an occasional college town gown sort of orchestra into a regular orchestra that met and aspired for greatness, brought in international soloists to the city of Tacoma, and gradually became more and more professional, including finally, of course, moving into the refurbished theaters, the Pantages and the Rialto. And that was the subject of our third episode, The Theater District Reborn, Symphonic Music in the Pantages and Rialto Theaters. And that one included Paul Cobbs, the director of the Tacoma Youth Symphony, who of course is also one of the major tenants of these theaters and also a major creator of classical symphonic music in the city of Tacoma. The fourth episode, which aired just last month, was called A Professional Symphony Orchestra, the Harvey Felder Years. And we had a wonderful time interviewing and reminiscing with Maestro Emeritus Harvey Felder, who of course led the symphony from 1994 until 2014. And his mission from the board was to create an excellent and a professional symphony orchestra, which he certainly masterfully accomplished. So tonight, the fifth and final episode of our look at the history of Symphony Tacoma, we're calling this one Into the Future, the Sarah Ioannides years. Sarah Ioannides, most of you know her from the podium, of course, but let me just remind you of a few things that maybe you don't know about her. She has more master's degrees than most people I know. She has a master's degree in orchestral conducting from the Juilliard School in New York, one of the most prominent in the world. She also has a diploma from the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. She has an advanced certificate in conducting from the Guildhall School in London. She also has both her bachelor's and master's degrees in music from Oxford University. She has been the conductor of a number of orchestras before Tacoma, including the Spartanburg Philharmonic in South Carolina, the El Paso Symphony Orchestra in Texas. She was an assistant conductor at Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra, and she has also directed the Cincinnati Symphony Youth Orchestra. Besides that, she has been the assistant conductor from the internationally acclaimed composer Tan Dun, traveling around the world with him, doing a whole variety of projects. She's been called by the New York Times a conductor of unquestionable strength and authority, and a conductor with magic, which is one of my favorite words, actually. She's also been noted as one of the top 20 female conductors worldwide by Lebrecht's Women Conductors, the Power List of 2016. And she's been named by the Los Angeles Times as one of 6 female conductors breaking the glass podium. She has conducted on, I think it's 5 of 7 continents, dozens and dozens of different orchestras, too many to list. But suffice it to say that she is enormously well connected around the world and continues to guest conduct on a regular basis. We're delighted that despite all that activity, she has chosen Tacoma as her home and lives here with her husband and kids. So she is one of our neighbors. Please help me welcome Maestra Sarah Ioannides.
Hi.
Greetings, Sarah. Great to see you online.
Thank you. Likewise. How are
Uh,
you?
the board, when it hired Harvey Felder in 1994, gave him a mission. And that mission was to create a professional symphony orchestra of excellent quality. And of course, by the time you arrived in 2014, I think we can say mission accomplished. And so my question to you is, what did the board ask you to begin doing? What, if anything, were instructions were you given by the board?
Well, it's an interesting question you ask. I don't remember getting a list, but I do remember a lot of conversations in the interview process and in the week where I did my debut with the orchestra. Conversations around creativity, collaborations, innovation, embracing Tacoma, and living here. And of course, building upon the wonderful professional excellence that the orchestra was really coming into. And at that time, I think we had a wonderful series of 4 classics and 2 Christmas pops. So it's changed a lot over this time, and we continue to reassess what the vision and the mission is for the orchestra. But I think those were essentially the things: creativity, collaboration, innovation, and really helping Tacoma to synergize with the orchestra.
Yeah. Of course, every conductor looks different on the podium. People have different styles of conducting. There's no one correct way to conduct. So you bring your own personality to the podium. But of course, every conductor also brings a whole network with them. Colleagues you've worked with, soloists, composers you've worked with, sometimes even concert masters arrive with conductors. Of course, Harvey Felder brought us people like Roberto Sierra, excellent composer, and we heard a number of pieces of his. You have also brought a number of composers with you, and I thought that we would begin by playing some videos, just short little excerpts that show some of the composers that you have brought and show your interest in contemporary music and how you have, in many ways, normalized for Tacoma audiences the presence of contemporary music amongst the old classics. So let's begin. I think it was it your second season, I believe? Well, your first season, of course. You brought the world premiere with Dame Evelyn Glenny, right? And Tacoma heard the very first performance of this concerto written for Dame Glenny. I have to say, I'm still kind of stunned that I saw that happen in the Pantages. I mean, that is a historic moment. But let's begin with something that you did in your second year, which is a really astonishing piece that, again, was like nothing Symphony Tacoma had ever seen before. And this was the Water Passion by the Chinese composer Tan Dun. Let's play a little bit of that piece.
This Water Passion, it was a really groundbreaking piece because it was the first passion, which is typically a Judeo-Christian story that used Eastern elements and Eastern thinking and Eastern philosophy and Eastern musical sounds and singing styles and worship styles as well.
Let's just move on to the next one. This was a concerto for the North Indian classical instrument called tabla, pair of percussion. And this featured the internationally acclaimed soloist Sandeep Das. Let's play just a little bit of that concerto. Amazing concerto by Gujaratne there for Sandeep Das. And then the third one is the one that we just heard last week by David Ludwig, written for his wife, Bela Hristova. And let's just play a little bit of this violin concerto. All three beautiful pieces and just radically different from each other. It's kind of amazing that three pieces like that were written so close to each other in time. I mean, they're so different from each other. And yet, they all use the orchestra, so they're sort of natural pieces for an orchestra to play. Tell us just a little bit about both your own interest in contemporary music, working with composers, and also your network of composers. How do you find these pieces?
Well, I've always loved playing contemporary music. I actually think back to my Oxford days when I was the concertmaster of the New Music Ensemble, and we did everything from Harrison Birtwistle to John Adams and just really, really cool stuff. And so I kind of fell in love with contemporary music, doing it, playing it, but then also exploring it, taking wonderful classes at Juilliard and things, and just finding out how different contemporary music is. And actually my father is a composer, my grandfather's a composer, so that kind of adds to my fascination with it. And I think if I weren't a conductor or weren't conducting quite so much, I'd probably be itching to be a composer myself. But there are so many great composers out there. I just love uncovering gems, and it feels like one of my favorite parts of my job, sharing that. Also, I think of the evolution of my time with Symphony Tacoma is, though I came with a kind of connections, as you say, I brought some things, my passion for working with multimedia, the experiences with tandem production, all of that kind of stuff. But as the time has been here, I've made new friends, I've found new composers, I've traveled more. Sandeep Das came out of seeing him actually in Abu Dhabi for the World Culture Summit. So it continues to evolve. So it's quite exciting that the development process is still happening right now.
Yeah. I used the term, you've normalized new music. It seems now that it's sort of a rare concert at Symphony Tacoma where there is not some fairly new piece, and that is, I think, fresh territory for your audience. Have you had any sense of pushback from an audience, or do you think that they're pretty accepting of this blend of old and new?
Well, I do. I think they're eager for it, actually hungry for it. Certainly, that's the direction where I feel that a lot of people want to go. It's not where everybody wants to go, and I always try to program anything new with also something that's beloved and a much loved favorite. So it's very important how we do it, how we present it, what are the materials we give people in advance, how we introduce composers, make them come to life, make friends of them, have the works understood from inside out so that it is more accepting. But yeah, I'm sure some people think, well, we should just play the composers that everybody knows and loves. But if we did that, we wouldn't have, Beethoven wouldn't have existed. We have to remember that we've got to keep moving forward into the future. And supporting living composers, because who knows, 100 years, 200 years from now, that could be what everybody's favorite thing is at the time. We just don't know. And it takes time. Sometimes there's a lag with audiences catching up with the modern day. I was just actually at the Van Gogh Imagine exhibit. And, you know, so tragic that this incredible composer that is so famed right now in the same situation couldn't sell his paintings at the time. And now they're worth, well, yeah, they're worth more than money. That's for sure.
Right. Let's bring now into the program Matt Drumm. Matt is the longtime principal timpanist for Symphony Tacoma. Hi, Matt. Good to see you.
Hi.
Matt, your bio says that you began playing drums and percussion at age 9. Well, I wonder how your parents felt about that. But you got really serious and you graduated from the University of Washington in 2000 with your degree in percussion performance. You've been with Symphony Tacoma since 1999, so many years with Harvey Felder and now under Sarah Ioannides. And during that same time period, you've been playing with Northwest Sinfonietta, the Bellevue Philharmonic, and the Northwest Philharmonia Northwest. You've also been a freelance percussionist. You've often played with Seattle Symphony, Seattle Opera, Pacific Northwest Ballet. Our audience will be pleased to know that you have played on many film scores, some of them Harry Potter and Star Wars films, live performances of those things. You've recorded soundtracks for movies, video games, and you've also been a teacher for many years, and you coach ensembles. You've worked with the Tacoma Youth Symphony, many different places. You have been a soloist in various percussion concertos, some of them written for you. You've played in a big band, and I happen to know, because we're Facebook friends, that during the pandemic, you transcribed a lot of drum solo parts from your favorite Rush albums. So you are an all-around percussionist, teacher, musician, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I wanted to just, Sarah and I have just been talking about her interest in contemporary music and bringing it onto the programs. One of the things, of course, that people may have noticed is that in a lot of traditional pre-20th century repertoire that the orchestra plays, the percussionists and the timpanist sit there a lot and count measures and wait to do something. But of course, the more contemporary the music, often the more percussion there is. And I wonder if you could just talk to us a little bit about, you know, what's been your view from the timpanist section about change of repertoire and about the kinds of things that you've been doing with Symphony Tacoma recently.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I love the classics, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, though. So, you know, Mahler that we just did, you know, that's some of my favorite stuff. But the new repertoire, well, it's interesting because it's, you know, over my, 20 plus year career, you play a lot of new music and some of it's great. You've also played some lousy stuff over the years, and it's kind of like you said, you got to kind of play this stuff to find out what's good. Some of my favorites have been, well, you alluded to that, the duo percussion concerto that you wrote for Amy and I to play, I don't know, about 10 years ago. That was a lot of fun. I love the Evelyn Glenny concerto because she's, obviously a percussionist. But there's been a lot of good stuff that we've played with the new stuff. As a timpanist, it doesn't change quite as much as like the percussion section, which is, I play, almost exclusively timpani, but I'm go over on percussion when I'm needed. And but the percussion section just like exploded in the 21st century, from like, bass drum, cymbals, snare drum, triangle stuff to like adding all these mallet instruments. And, a lot of our concerts, now you'll see where they've just, it's a pretty massive section over there at times. So they've, the percussion section really has to adapt, and a lot of times it's more fun because there's more to do. You're not sitting around as much. As the timpanist, it changed a lot. Like in Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, a lot of times I have like 2 pitches for like the entire piece. And so I tune those notes, and sometimes it's just 2 drums. But in the modern stuff, there's a lot more where like, because the key is changing, or there's maybe not like necessarily like a key center as much as in Beethoven's day. So I have to deal with, changing pitches sometimes on the fly, with the pedals, dealing with more drums. And if you guys saw the last concert we did, I actually had 5 drums with me, just to kind of adapt the range for the Ludwig violin concerto. And so that stuff gets a lot more challenging. I mean, Beethoven has its challenges, but it's like Beethoven, all the rhythmic stuff plus my feet can be really busy as well.
Over your 20+ year career as a professional timpanist, you've played with a number of other orchestras, as I mentioned. How do you think of Symphony Tacoma sort of amid these other orchestras? What are the differences between these different orchestras, either their audiences or their purpose or their repertoire?
Question. I mean, Tacoma Symphony is it's a full-size symphony orchestra. And so some of the other ones that I've played in, like the Bellevue Philharmonic, that was another kind of similar orchestra where we get to play like some of the, the Mahler, the big repertoire, Tchaikovsky, stuff like that. And of course, as a timpanist, like that's some of my very favorite repertoire. And I really, there's moments that I get to really play out. And I remember the Tchaikovsky concert we did earlier this year, like there's like Sarah, there was one spot she was like, give me more. And I was like, okay, let's go. So that's kind of fun. But then like Northwest Sinfonietta is another group that I have played in for a number of years. And that's a chamber orchestra. So and what that means is it's a smaller orchestra. We have fewer strings, fewer winds. Occasionally we will branch out into some bigger stuff. So we can still do like, the Mozarts, the Beethoven, stuff like that. But we don't get to usually do the big Mahler symphonies and stuff. And it's kind of an interesting orchestra. It's a little, it's a little more intimate. It's not quite chamber music where, there's no conductor. So it's kind of a halfway between those. And it's fun. I mean, I obviously can't, I don't play as loud because that just would not be appropriate. But it's kind of like I get to explore like this more sensitive side of timpani. And that is also kind of that orchestra has done a lot of kind of experimenting, little multimedia sorts of things. And so, and that orchestra, I'm the only percussionist. So I do timpani and any percussion that comes up in there.
I guess the point just being that there's an ecosystem in which Symphony Tacoma exists. And players like you often play across the ecosystem. And we, of course, we too are part of that ecosystem, the audience, choosing which concerts to go to, when, etc. Sarah, tell us just a little bit more about the way you think about programming for Tacoma. You might have programmed differently for Spartanburg or El Paso or someplace you're guest conducting, but how do you think about the Tacoma audience and the way you program?
Well, their response is always one thing that we gauge things by. You can always tell, I know that this audience loves American music. When we did the West Side Story, and we made it a sort of community collaboration with with Symphony Tacoma Voices, they were really excited about that. They're also really excited about the planets. So, and they seem to be excited by putting musicians in different parts of the auditorium. You can just feel the buzz. I think this is a really fantastic audience. They're excited about a lot of stuff, which is great. So that kind of makes it even harder. But we have other ways of measuring. I mean, the orchestra, I invite them to send in their kind of wish list to me anytime, but we also send out surveys to the orchestra. We also do the same with our audience. So we get a lot of audience feedback. We've even sent out lists of, okay, if we were to program these 25 pieces, which order would you have them in? So we get regular feedback. And then I also think about the community partnerships and collaborations, which are the organizations that we can kind of branch out from and really fulfill our mission, which is building community through music. And so what will bring more people to the concert hall, and where people's passion are. And then I'm also looking at repertoire development for the orchestra as we try to increase our own diversity in programming, and there's so many different ways that you can go, and the season is just way too short in some ways, but it's really special. It makes every concert have a lot of consideration and thought, and how we tie it together. So in fact, we're doing a talk with the board this weekend about the art of programming, and I've been thinking about that a lot, how we do it. It's a lot.
I think it's not too much to say that you've invested quite a bit of time and energy in reimagining what concerts could be. You've brought a lot of multimedia. Talk to us a little bit about your interest in multimedia and some of your favorite projects that you've done with us.
Well, I think the interest comes in seeing how successfully great other artists do things, or whether it's Philip Glass or Tandon. It's a part of, I think, the American contribution to classical music is multimedia, and so certainly I came having done a number of those things in El Paso. I designed my own Planets film. I also did Steve Reich's The Desert Music 50-minute film. I was actually out there in the desert with a camera filming. Fortunately, we didn't use the footage that I made, but it served as impetus for a really good filmmaker to go in and create. So here there have been some really special projects like Fire Mountain, where we filmed at the Glass Museum. We filmed Hilltop Glass artists working, and we also took footage from Mount Rainier and put that together. So that of course is one of my absolute favorites. But we shared the planets. There's also Caribbean Rhapsody. Now it's a virtual production, but we might do that sometime with the artworks as well as Mio La Création du Monde. So there's many different ways of doing multimedia, and it's a budget extra that we have to choose carefully when and how we do it, and make sure it's tried and tested, so that and sometimes it's hard to try and test something when it's absolutely new. But yeah, I think you've got one of them to share, right? Fire Mountain, maybe.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in just a moment. Before we get to that, let me just talk to you a little bit. Of course, one of Harvey's signature programs was really building up a first-class educational program. And under his stewardship, he and his team contacted and worked with school districts and music teachers and all the logistics that go into bringing literally 5,000 kids to the Pantages over a period of a couple of days. And so, of course, Harvey's program was very much built around Harvey and was really kind of his brainchild and his style. You brought in another idea for the concert. Tell us just a little bit about the Linked Up program. Just introduce it, and then we'll play just a little clip to show people what we're talking about.
Sure. This is the Carnegie Hall Link Up program, and it's basically designed by the education team of Carnegie Hall. And they have a composer, and they intermix various standard repertoire around a certain theme. So you've got the orchestra swings, the orchestra rocks, the orchestra moves, the orchestra sings. So there's 4 programs, and I think they're still developing more of them. And so they also have incredible multimedia and fantastic materials, so that the teachers all get their materials with CDs, and then the kids can actually play along, or either instrumental violins or drums, but recorders is what we ask everybody to do, to play recorders and sing. So it's actually interactive. It's not just a symphony playing, it's actually the entire audience. Well, they don't have to, but we encourage them to actually play with the orchestra. And so everybody plays with the Symphony Tacoma when we do those concerts. So it's really interactive and special. I've enjoyed doing a number of those.
We have a little clip of one of those concerts. Let's go ahead and play that.
But for now, just bring you right to the front door.
The Tacoma Symphony has done schools concerts in the Pantages Theatre for 20 years now, but this year they're a bit different. Introduced by new director Sarah Ioannides, the link-up concerts invite kids to play as well as listen.
So, what does it mean for the orchestra to sing?
The benefits of this program are really the curriculum that goes along with the program, from learning how to sing to learning about the composers. There's a very wide range of musical styles and examples that they can get into. And then secondly, they get to come along to the concert and participate, and that's a pretty rare thing that they will play recorders, even violins, and already come knowing the music. That's a terrific thing.
I thought it was amazing. I really liked the singers.
It's amazing to see how all the instruments work and how they can all work together and see how they cooperate into each other and make a beautiful piece. I've never been to a concert where you can actually play with the orchestra.
It just makes me happy to look at. I don't know. Those are such joyous events. Matt, what's it like to play those concerts for kids?
I really enjoyed them. I've enjoyed them, since we've done them, with Harvey. Actually, in the early years with Harvey, we actually had like a smaller groups of musicians would go into the schools, and sometimes we'd go into a school like multiple times, which is pretty cool. We kind of got away from that, but that was a little bit extra special, because then when we go to the concerts and then we'd find our school and we could wave at them, and they felt a connection with that, which is pretty cool. But generally, I love being able to reach kids with classical music. I mean, it's one of my loves, and I think a lot of people who don't know classical music, the kind of the stereotype, classical music's just boring. Well, I think it's because a lot of kids haven't ever heard really good classical music, live and in person. So when we do these concerts and have playing Mars from the Planets, that's one of the ones, that was one of the early ones that I liked as a kid, because I didn't always love classical music. So playing this great classical music for them is really important, for them. They'll enjoy it. Some of them may choose to be musicians, and even beyond that, just cultivating a future audience. Because we want to keep this. We have so many hundreds of years of classical music that we want to keep going, but we gotta keep reaching kids with it to get them to love it as well.
So true. And of course, not only listening and even performing, but sometimes even creating. Sarah, you are particularly interested in children's music and in particular getting kids to be creative. Introduce for us just a little bit your conception of the Eternal Light program, and then we'll play a little clip from that.
Yeah, this was born out of COVID-19, when we couldn't do some of our education programs in the way we wanted. So I wanted to find some way to interact with kids and to get them to be creative. And so we suggested they send in a little bit of music they had written. They had to either write it, they had to paint something, or create something, maybe a poem. And we would make a commission out of all of these pieces into one. So the concept was kind of just an idea, and lo and behold, we did it, and we're going to actually do it again this year because it was so successful. And it was just wonderful to see how we could work with the kids to enlighten them, not just to create something, but then what should we do with it? Who should play it? And basically work with them to become little composers themselves.
Yeah. Let's watch just a little clip of this, and then you can tell us a little bit about how it was made. All right, so just some excerpts from what was a longer piece, and we heard some electronic synthesizer music by an older student, and we heard some, I think there was a young jazz pianist involved, and there was a dancer and some poets and a number of artists, some singers. Tell us a little bit about how all that was put together.
Well, I'll first mention that the inspiration for it was Mozart. We were due to perform Mozart's Requiem, and there were going to be a number of kids involved singing along with the Symphony Tacoma voices on some of the soprano sections. And so when that went down, and the kids have been really looking forward to it, I thought, we're going to do something with those kids. And that also helped to contribute towards the idea. So that's where the name came from. It came from Lux Aeterna, eternal light, and trying to give it this feeling of hope and hold through this pandemic 2 years ago. And it launched about a year ago. So the project took, I don't know, 6 to 9 months to put together. And the creative team, and there's actually there's a few videos on Symphony Tacoma's YouTube channel under a playlist called Eternal Light, so you can learn a lot more about it. But there was a creative team, myself, a really top class orchestrator and producer called Kim Scharnberg. His son, Will Scharnberg, who works now in LA doing a lot of sound engineering and working with songwriters, etc. And Fernanda Films, which is somebody that they had worked with. So the four of us kind of teamed up, and we worked with the students behind the scenes. We coached them. We had them record stuff, send it in, record, take another take, send it back in. And then we got Symphony Tacoma musicians to play and Tacoma Youth Chorus to sing. So it was just a kind of all-encompassing, felt like serving our mission, really, building community with music, for sure. Because people were connected in another way that we couldn't. And we did that with Simply Symphonic as well, with our orchestra performed. Though that people couldn't come in person, we did a virtual production. We did so many virtual productions of it. So yeah, that's a little bit of a synopsis.
Very good. And of course, all of this takes a lot of coordination and a lot of outreach to partners. And I'd like to bring in now Karina Barn. Karina is the executive director of Symphony Tacoma. Welcome, Karina.
Hello. Hi, Greg.
Hi,
and again, just a little bit, you were the interim executive director with the San Antonio Symphony before you came to Tacoma. And before that, you had been the vice president and general manager and director of the orchestra personnel there. But you've also been associated with the Go Ballet in Vancouver, the Pittsburgh Symphony, the Aspen Music Festival and School, and the Wolf Trap Foundation for the Performing Arts. You've got degrees in trombone performance from Carnegie Mellon, and also a Master of Arts in Management degree there from the same place. I remember you joined us, what, about 3 years ago, something like that?
In September of 2018, so it's been almost 4 years at this point.
And what a powerful partner you have been in all of this. You know, the creative team, of course, is full of wonderful, grand ideas, but somebody's got to run the show and hold it all together and make sure it's paid for. And so, as Sarah has brought up various things that have partnerships attached to them, I thought we could focus in, first of all, on one of the big projects that Sarah put together, and I believe you were in on it, maybe your first year or somewhere in there, called Fire Mountain. And talk to us just a little bit, I guess both Sarah and Karina, you can sort of give us both the creative side and the logistics side about how an orchestra like Symphony Tacoma puts together something like that. Who's involved and how does it all work?
Well, Fire Mountain actually predates me, but I can say any big project like that will certainly add a couple more wrinkles, I think, to both of our faces, because there's a lot of work involved. Sarah, maybe do you want to touch on Fire Mountain?
Sure. Yeah, that was, I think the conception of Fire Mountain, which was a multi-partner collaboration involving both Symphony Tacoma Voices, but the National Parks Association, the Hilltop Glass Artists, and the Glass Museum. And fortunately, funding, thanks to both Andy and Laura Stone, right before Karina came, Andy below, and an incredible composer who's actually grew up in Puyallup that I just happened to go, and I found this out after I talked to him about this project, that he actually lived in Tacoma and played in TYSA, the Tacoma Youth Symphony Orchestra, Daniel Ott. And so there were so many people involved, and it took several years to germinate and come to fruition, but it was pretty exciting. And I think one of the most valuable parts of it, other than the fact that there's this incredible piece out there with a beautiful video, is that kids who live here, had never been up Mount Rainier, got to go snowshoeing on the top of the mountain and improvise with percussion instruments. You were there, Greg. Do you remember how cool that was? And just gonna get a sense of being creative and just trying something and follow our process of putting on this world premiere and coming down to the hall and having pizza in the lobby and meeting the musicians and the composer, and I'm sure that these people's lives would change forever from Fire Mountain.
Let's give a little watch of an excerpt from this multimedia piece, Fire Mountain by Daniel Ott.
This is a collaboration on multiple levels. We thank the Museum of Glass, Mount Rainier's Parks Association, the Hilltop Glass Artists, who've all partnered with Symphony Tacoma in creating this incredible work by Daniel Ott.
The naturalist John Moore called Mount Rainier the noblest of all the fire mountains, when comparing her to the many other majestic peaks, not only in Washington, but all along the Pacific coast. For me, first and foremost, Fire Mountain is a celebration of Mount Rainier's beauty, something near and dear to me, having grown up in nearby Puyallup. My work, which uses not only the full orchestral resources of Symphony Tacoma, but also the choir Symphony Tacoma Voices, is meant to both evoke that beauty, as well as warn against the dangers of the mountain's rapidly receding glaciers. Coupled with the new film, which juxtaposes images of nature with the act of making glass art, Fire Mountain will, I hope, create a powerful statement for all who experience it.
The footage comes from Mount Rainier as well as glassmakers to create an incredible fire and ice production. Symphony Tacoma seeks to have art respond to life and build relationships in our community. Art can serve as a catalyst for education, growth, and transformation in a region. Through a process of community collaboration, this partnership seeks to produce an inspiring experience, empowering participants and students to undertake an active role in protecting our region. We thank our sponsors, Boeing and the National Endowment for the Arts.
Another stunning memory from a few years ago, which actually you repeated again, Sarah, as I recall, a few years later, basically based on audience demand. So an example of a contemporary piece written just for this audience and this orchestra, which was a smash success. Mm-hmm. Before we continue to talk about collaborations and logistics, let's watch another clip. This one includes actually excerpts from 3 different projects. One was a collaboration with students from the School of the Arts. The second one was a collaboration with Ballet Tacoma. And the third one is the Cascade Conducting and Composing Workshop, which was created by Sarah Ioannides just a few years ago. Let's watch this video and then we'll talk about these projects.
disturb our streets again. Your lives will pay the forfeit of the peace.
Hi, my name is Brandon Jackson. I'm a composer and conductor residing in Boston, Massachusetts. I hail from Chicago, Illinois. I'm the recipient of the African American Scholarship for the Cascade Conducting 2020 Masterclass. And I have to say, I had an incredible time in this masterclass, not only working with Maestra Sarah, from all of these other master's students and doctorate students.
Right now, in this period of our lives where everything feels chaotic and uncertain, it's important to hold out hope that spring will come for us every year. I would like to thank David Ludwig and Sarah Ioannides for their fantastic mentorship in this program, and I would like to thank all of the orchestra players and the conductors for their hard work and brilliant interpretation of my piece. I hope you enjoy the performance. Thank you.
Just little snippets of a long and beautiful program that benefited both conductors from all over the country and also composers. Sarah, tell us just a little bit about the inception of the Cascade workshop, and then I want to get Karina's take on how all of this operates.
The conception really came not from myself. I have to give credit to Teo Benson, who's the first violinist in his orchestra, and his wife, who's also a conductor, Paula Madrigal. They came to me and asked me if I would be interested in doing a masterclass one year. It was a few years after I came in, and I hadn't done that much teaching of conducting, a few masterclasses, but the idea really appealed because after, I think you read the number of places I studied, after that number of years of studying, it's kind of time to share some of that knowledge, and we thought, let's give it a go. I don't know if it's going to work, but yeah. And then we were able to get partners with Symphony Tacoma. Karina came on board, and what you saw a clip of was something that was a really wonderful partnership between Cascade and Symphony Tacoma, with the National Endowment for the Arts grant to enable these compositions to be recorded during COVID, and live conductors to come to Tacoma during COVID and socially distance and perform in the Pantages and record these excellent 6 works under the guidance of David Ludwig, who's now the Dean of Juilliard School of Music. So it was just a fantastic thing, and we're entering our fifth year now.
So Karina, we've just looked at a whole lot of partnerships with Tacoma School of the Arts. There was Lincoln High School. There was the Ballet Tacoma. There was the Park District. Now there's the Cascade Workshop. What is your role in all of this? How do you hold all this together? Who do you have working with you to make sure that this is funded and organized?
Well, I think the first thing I wanted to make sure we give thanks to is my predecessor, Andy Belo, because Andy did 2 great things for Symphony Tacoma, or Tacoma Symphony Orchestra, when he was when he was executive director for big portion of it. The first thing that he did was really make sure that the symphony finances were stable. And anyone coming into an executive director role knows that if you don't ask for the finances and if you don't see that the symphony is operating okay, then you're going to be in for a big surprise during your first year. So Andy made sure that when he left, especially that the symphony was on strong financial footing. So that's really important. But the second thing that Andy did was he created and surrounded himself with a good team. So we have longevity. We have a lot of symphony veterans here on staff. We have at least 3 people that have been with the symphony since 2000s and a little bit before that. There's not many organizations that can say that. Previous organizations that I've been with, it's just been a revolving door. So I feel really lucky to have the team that Andy set up. It's myself as executive director, Laura Stone, our advancement manager, Susan Newsom, who is doing our production. She's our production manager for this, and she's also our marketing manager. Denise Klein, our finance manager, Saul Klein, our general manager, Lydia Robinson, who's our patron services manager, and Peggy Thorndill, who is our librarian. So all of us together make quite the team. And there's a lot of fun that happens in the office, and there's a lot of also a lot of stress that happens in the office. But we work together to make sure that the symphony is able to fund all of our programs and able to make sure that we have the resources that we need. So I was thinking about this. It's March 9th, 2022. And I think our first Facebook or Instagram live that we did was almost 2 years ago to this day, maybe a couple of weeks later. And the first one that we did, we were basically, sitting around asking Sarah's question, on her computer. And then I remember we finished the interview, and Sarah said, "I think we need to get more lighting," or it was something like that. So I was like, "Okay, yeah, we can do that." So we really come and we really evolved a long way. But we have a great team of people working for us here. A lot of the partnerships that are created, we approach different groups. So we'll say, hey, Symphony Tacoma is looking for X, Y, and Z. Are you interested in partnering with us? But the ones that we love the most are when people say, hey, I'm so-and-so organization. We want to partner with you. Can you provide X, Y, and Z? So that's been it's been good for us. Recently, we've had a lot of people that have approached us wanting to collaborate with us. And that's been really, really special for me, at least, just knowing that people in the community recognize what we're doing and they want to work with us. So that's been very special.
Probably a lot of our audience knows just how precarious the position of symphony orchestras has been for quite a few years. As culture shifts and new money goes towards rock concerts instead of symphony orchestra concerts, and of course, film and streaming television and all these things compete for our time. But it does seem as though the combination of Andy Belo and now you, and of course Harvey and Sarah, really have created something kind of uniquely stable and very popular in the city of Tacoma. I don't know what your perspective on that is, but this seems like an organization that is really quite well centered in the community.
I think so, and thank you for that. I think, one of the things that was really attractive to me about Symphony Tacoma was the stability. And anyone who reads my background knows that I came from an organization that is less than stable. So making sure that whatever position I put myself in after that was a place where I would feel secure was very important. It was at the top of my list. So when I came here to interview and I met the team and I met Sarah and I met the board, it just felt like it was going to be a good fit. So I crossed my fingers and I hope that it worked out. And I was very lucky that it did. I'm very happy, very, very, very happy to be here. But what I'll say is our patrons stayed with us. One of the most important things for us about the pandemic, and I don't want to dwell too much on this because I know we're trying to move past it in a lot of ways, is that we wanted to make sure that we had an audience back with us when we came back. So we knew, all right, we're not going to be taking all of the 2020-2021 season off. We know that we had to produce something. And the goal is to make sure that our patrons stayed with us. And I know that from reading some of the comments in the chat as much as I could, we did have people stay with us. And, some people got, YouTube fatigued, Zoom fatigued, and we all understand that. But we also had, over 700 people in the concert hall coming back to Mahler last week. So, the pandemic definitely hurt us. But at the same point, we had our patrons come back, and there's a lot of loyalty to Symphony Tacoma, a lot of loyalty with our patrons, with our staff, with our conductors, and with our board. So there's something unique, and I'm just really happy to be a part of it.
Let's bring Matt Drumm back in before we close. I'd like to hear from all of you about how we do, this final episode is into the future. And how do we perpetuate not only Symphony Tacoma, but classical music, and particularly classical orchestra music, into the future? Matt, I know you're involved in teaching and coaching the next generation. What are your thoughts about what orchestras should be doing or could be doing to really build the next generation?
Well, I already mentioned, about, just reaching those kids with the orchestra program. That's a really great way to do it. And of course, private teachers like myself, and we have a lot of private teachers in the orchestra. But I think doing some of the stuff like kind of the interactive multimedia, I think can attract, a little bit different audience. Like, for example, we're doing this Video Games Live coming up. And that's like a totally different audience than, might come to a Beethoven concert. But it's great music, and some of them may only come to that thing, but some of them may go, hey, live music is great. So we can maybe get some more people that way. Other things that have been popular, like playing along with like an actual film in the back. I've done that a few times with Seattle Symphony, and those are like really well attended, and people love like the live music, like along with Star Wars. It's such a great soundtrack, and I think doing things like that, or even like I've done some pops concerts where like we don't have the film going on, but we play like movie music, and again, it attracts a little bit different audience, but it's great music, and incorporating that along with, of course, all the regular classics, stuff like that can really help to kind of broaden our audience.
Yeah. And Sarah, what do you think about the kind of the responsibility of an orchestra in a changing society, a society which is having lots of conversations about equity and inclusion and finding voices that have not been heard yet? What is your sense of the responsibility of a symphony orchestra?
Well, absolutely. First of all, I want to agree with everything that Matt said too. I really appreciate hearing that perspective. We've got to reach always a wider audience. Now, that also means diversifying, and that means sometimes you have to go a little bit narrower in order to reach different communities within our community. But certainly, the Germanic Russian tradition of symphonic classical music, we've been there, we've done a lot of that, and we want to embrace the rest, everybody else, and that's why you see more modern music, is because that gives us the opportunity to play live women composers, for example, and of course there are some before nowadays, but there's more nowadays. There's much more diversity in contemporary music than there is when you look back in the past 200 or 300 years, because it was such a narrow, privileged field, and too many voices were shut out. We know that history, it's not good, and so that's why it's really important. I feel the mission of an orchestra needs to be continuing to evolve. It cannot stand still. I love the pops music, but I also think that we have to become more virtual. We have to become more hybrid, because as I think people have got drawn into their computers, for better or worse. Some of it is for better, and some of it is more competition for us. So the fact that we built our YouTube channel, we have some beautiful productions, is certainly something that we I don't know, we can't always afford to do hybrid, but it's something for a question for us for the future, is how can we maintain an audience online as well, because that can also be interesting and valid, and help spread the word of what Symphony Tacoma is doing. But I think also more projects that are very Tacoma based. There's many more, much as we've collaborated with a lot of partners, there's still a lot more out there that we'd love to work with.
We need to bring this to a close, but I just want to remind people this is part 5 of a series on the history of Symphony Tacoma and the history of classical music in Tacoma. Began with our first episode last September with a piece by Kim Davenport. And all of those things reside online on YouTube or on Facebook, the Symphony's channel. So I invite you to go back and watch any of those that you like. And I just want to turn it now over to, once again, the Executive Director, Karina Barn, to help me thank our sponsors who make all of this possible. And just a farewell from me, thank you, Sarah Ioannides, thank you, Matt Drumm, and thank you for Karina for joining us on this final episode.
Well, we would love to thank our March concert sponsors, Multicare, Tacoma Creates, Tacoma Community College, Harbor Plastic Surgery Center, the Grand Cinema, Tacoma Art Museum, Applebaum Violin, and Indochine. But I also wanted to make sure that everyone in the chat who's watching can give a special thank you to our host, Greg Youtz. And I don't know if anyone else caught this, and I hope that you did, but in that Simply Symphonic video, you will see Greg Youtz. He's playing the recorder. So he is a host. He is a recorder player. He can play the bassoon. He teaches at Pacific Lutheran University, and he has been a loyal supporter and loyal everything for Symphony Tacoma for many, many, many years. So I just also wanted to make sure we said thank you to Greg for doing all this for us.
It is
and a
always
wonderful
a pleasure.
composer. We're going to be playing your music very soon.
How can I forget that?
Yes. So award-winning celebrity composer, we tremendously grateful to you, Greg. Thank you.
It is always a joy to support my local Symphony Tacoma. So thanks to all of you for what you do. Thanks everybody for watching. And I will see you at the Pantages at the next concert. Good night, everybody.
Good night.